The views and opinions expressed on the show are those of the guests or hosts, and not necessarily those of the advertisers, networks, platforms, or stations. Warning that the content of the show may not be suitable for all audiences, and that viewer discretion is advised. The show does not intend to provide medical, legal, or financial advice, and viewers or listeners should consult with a professional.
Welcome back, everybody, to Paranormal Intelligence Agency Radio Live. I'm your host, Jack Carey, and we are broadcasting from 300 feet deep in an abandoned nuclear missile silo somewhere lost in the post-apocalyptic wastelands of the Dakota Territories. And today, in the war wagon, when we went to town, we saw a sighting of the Dakota man-beast. He was foaming at the mouth, looked like he was glowing radioactive, and definitely looking for human flesh. So be careful out there. We've got a new member of our security team, actually two new members of the security team. I'm joined, as always, by the paranormal crime fighting duo Daisy and the Sundance Kid, but we've got an additional security agent in the silo tonight, and she goes by the name Ruby, and we've got a backup for her, who is a new rescue for us. We rescued a new feline, and he's a 5-year-old rescue named River. And so River is joining us in the silo also for our broadcast this evening. And he's, River looks out for a different kind of intruder than the rest of this crew. So, but, it's been an interesting week. Got still in the midst of getting a lot of stuff done around here and watching the crazy markets. Last week, we touched upon quite a bit on the crypto markets. We'll be doing that again this evening because our cyber prophecies feature prominently the crypto markets and the precious metals markets. So we're kind of taking an in-depth view. A lot of times we kind of zoom out on a subject, and that can be valuable. And a lot of times I like to zoom in on a subject, and that can be a valuable thing. And I have, done this for 30 years along with cryptozoology, so I actually know quite a bit about what I'm doing in the so-called trading world. But in the cryptocurrency world, as that features in our cyber prophecies, it basically says that we're in the transitional phase right now. And I have to remind everybody that this is the ascending part of the Kali Yuga. The world planetary cycle of the Kali Yuga is real. It features prominently in Vedic astrology and ancient alien knowledge left on this planet. And really, it's an interesting thing. Coming from our galactic center is a constant bombardment of a special type of energy that normally affects biological life everywhere in the galaxy. And this is just a natural mechanism. And during this planetary cycle called the Kali Yuga, there are periods of time during the ascension when you, as a planet, you're being blocked by this field of debris, and you pop up out of that field of debris and you get bombarded by these rays, right? That's the Kali Yuga. And when that happens, you, as a species, go through all kinds of basically upgrades. All kinds of really cool stuff starts to happen. People take on like special abilities they never thought they had before. People begin to get born with special abilities that didn't show up in the human race before. People become far more psychic. You have golden ages occur, so-called golden ages occur in civilizations and stuff like that. That's not to say that there isn't a huge amount of turbulence that takes place in the transitionary period. And that's where we are with the world's financial system, right? And that system affects everybody. It affects our daily lives. And what's interesting to me is that crossroads that nobody ever talks about because most people don't even know it exists. But there is a crossroads of paranormal information coming from paranormal information sources like the Webbot that derives its knowledge from the fact that the human species is both apparently a singular organism and that organism is psychic in nature. That's pretty paranormal. Able to ascertain all kinds of events and themes and things taking place in our immediate event stream future. And when that coincides with ancient Vedic astrology, and that coincides basically with financial news all over the world that is backing up what the Webbot had predicted all those many years ago, talking about going back into the 90s when those original Alta reports came out. That's what I call the sacred alignment, if you will. It's that place where all of these things that don't normally, or you wouldn't think would have a relationship to one another, all line up and all begin to point in the same direction. And that's an interesting place to be, and that's where I believe we are right now. This past week, if you're involved in cryptos, was they have called it a historical moment in the so-called flash crash that occurred a few days ago, which was really interesting. It occurred in the overall market. They basically said that, the Dow dropped like 800 points, the NASDAQ dropped like 800 points, like in the crypto markets all crashed simultaneously, right? Well, a lot of the insiders right now, like Tom Lee over at Bitmine Immersion Technologies and a lot of other really astute Wall Street-based crypto analysts are saying that something funny happened with all of that. It looks like somebody somewhere was able to ascertain where the weakest link was and all of the leverage that was currently taking place in the crypto markets. And there was a insane amount of leverage going on, right? And they were able to basically, if you ever played Jenga, they were basically able to remove that block and watch it all just come tumbling down. And then they were waiting at the bottom to cover all of their short positions. Well, what's a short position? That's when you bet that the market's going to go down. Well, whoever did this knew that was going to take place. And all of a sudden, all of these very mysterious wallets opened up all around the world, crypto wallets. And they had only been open for a few days, and all of a sudden somebody deposits hundreds of millions of dollars into them, and then they short sell the crypto market. And then all of a sudden you have the largest historical, so-called flash crash in history. It since is all like recovered, which is interesting because whoever did this was able to cover their short positions, their bet on this happening, right at the bottom, flip all of those positions to long positions, and now they've ridden it back up to where it's at now, which is normal levels, right? So that's crazy. And what that did was it wiped out $508 billion and leveraged positions. In other words, if you go on to X right now and, formerly Twitter or whatever, and you go to, X Bitcoin or X Ethereum, I don't really mess with other altcoins. Some traders do. I say you stick with the blue chips. You stick with the grade A. The top ones that institutions are buying for people's 401ks and etc. The other altcoins, a lot of them are just going to disappear, and they're going to disappear along with your money if you invest in those. That's just my opinion. I wouldn't do that. I do think it's wise to have a long-term time horizon on the crypto market as this transitional phase of the Kali Yuga grips our financial systems and changes it over into this new age. And don't be afraid of cryptos. Educate yourself. Don't fear. Read. The more you read, the less you fear. And the more you will understand how and why the top two, Bitcoin and Ethereum, actually are going to change how everything is done on the planet. It really will. And that's happening at a time when you're seeing a death of fiat currencies. The reason why that's happening is because they're just printing money. Not just our government. All the governments are doing it, and they have to. There's no other way. They say you've got to grow your way out of debt. Well, the only way to grow your way out of debt is to run the economy hot. And how you do that is you lower interest rates as low as you can lower them, and you just pump those printing machines till they run out of ink. Just keep pumping it, because there is no other choice. And when you realize there is no other choice, you see the inevitable that will eventually occur. And that inevitable is the fact that will become a non-viable way of having value and an exchange of value. In other words, those currencies will become so hyperinflated over time that, it'll cost you $15 for a loaf of bread. You know what I mean? So really the smart rule of thumb, in my opinion, and it was funny because I was watching the price of silver explode at the same time that the crypto markets were in decline, is to match dollar for dollar what you invest in the crypto market. Invest in precious metals in physical form in your possession, dollar for dollar. One will beautifully offset the other, and at the same time allow you to participate in this vast amount of change that's going to take place. Silver has long been said by the webbot that it will become so-called unobtainium. That means so valuable that you can't find it anymore ever again. Physical silver becomes that valuable. So if you have a bunch of it right now, and it just broke its all-time historic price, which was right at $50. I was watching it live right before the show, and it was at 53 and change. They just showed on Fox Business a silver analyst that showed the charts depicting the 45-year cup and handle pattern, as they call it. That pattern has always occurred before a major explosion in any asset. It doesn't really matter what the asset is if it forms a pattern like this. And this pattern was formed over a 45-year period of time. The longer a pattern takes to form, the more powerful it is when the move actually takes place. Nobody's ever even seen a 45-year cup and handle pattern. And why and how that could happen is because it has been artificially suppressed by the global banking cabal since forever, since the silver wars between China and England. That's how far back this manipulation goes. And what happens when you hold a beach ball below the water for long enough and then you let it go? That's right. It literally explodes. All kinds of stuff are tied to the silver market. Billions of dollars in derivative contracts. Imagine taking metal that you don't even possess and you're able to borrow against that from various institutions 100-fold. And then you artificially bet on a decline in the price of that metal over and over and over again. Every time it goes up, boom, you short sell it. Every time it goes up. And what you can do over time is you can literally leverage hundreds of billions of dollars. So those little micro movements are all controlled, and they're just printing money off of being able to control it. So that control seems to have ended. The WebBot, if you follow Cliff High at all, he's saying there's some indications, and there's some, I've heard the same thing from an independent silver analyst that I follow, that somebody somewhere, and this is why I say that there has to be two separate cabals of some kind vying for control right now, but somebody somewhere with extremely deep pockets is buying up vast amounts of silver and taking physical possession of it off the COMEX forever. That stuff is going to private vaults in record amounts. How the metal market used to work before they started taking physical possession and these vast amounts of silver and gold was that, you know, it would sit in a warehouse controlled by the COMEX, and the traders would just trade the paper back and forth over who owns it. That way you don't have to move massive amounts of weight to different locations, because that costs a lot of money to do. It's very cumbersome, it's very heavy, and it's very hard to get from location to location in large quantities securely. But that's what's happening. That should be your wake-up call. The fact that gold is at $4,200 an ounce and climbing. Every single central bank around the world buying it in record amounts. Record amounts. And why are they doing that? Because they're watching the government sit there and just run their printing machines. It's a point you have to say, oh my God, this whole house of cards is going to come down at some point. Now, there's all kinds of cross currents of things occurring. Like, a lot of people believe the Trump administration's in the process of tokenizing the U.S. debt in such a way that it can be dispersed out as a cryptocurrency, and that would sort of fix our problem. If it were backed by gold, and guess what? They are buying vast amounts of gold right now. So, the U.S. is quietly buying a ton of it. Not reported on the news, of course, but that's what's happening. If you follow silver and gold traders the way that I do on a daily basis. So, go down to your local coin shop if you haven't acquired any precious metals, gold or silver. Gold is becoming too expensive, really, if they even have it in stock. I went down to our local shop the other day. when I was acquiring some silver, and the gold was gone. So they said if you get incremental gold at all, it's sold at before it even hits the shelf. So that's gone, and you're going to pay a big retail amount above spot right now if you try to go and buy anything. Silver is going to cost you $5, maybe $6 above spot for a 1 ounce round. So, but you know what? It's better than not obtaining any at all at this stage, in my opinion. A lot of people that I know have been silver stackers for many years now, and I have too. And I just think that it's a very wise thing to do. And, tonight we are going to be talking about 3i Atlas coming at us. It's something that we've been talking about, but we're going to look at it from the ancient alien perspective because there's a lot of chatter online right now. Various chat boards, if you're out there, about this possibly being an Anunnaki ship, the return of the Anunnaki. And some people, like the Webbot, refers to them not as the Anunnaki, but the Elohim, which will be familiar to a lot of people that have read certain biblical passages, will know all about the Elohim. They do fit the bill of what the Sumerians were describing as the Anunnaki. So, different cultures call these beings by different names, and that's very interesting to me. But if you are a biblical scholar out there in the world, you will be able to look up a passage where it talks about the sons of Anak. And the sons of Anak were the sons of the Anunnaki. So the Bible does mention the Anunnaki, and it doesn't say that the Elohim and the Anunnaki were one and the same. So we kind of have to point that out. There is a lot of good historical information in the Old Testament. So, but that's interesting. For those of you who don't know, the Anunnaki is a discovery from the ancient 12,000-year-old Sumerian tablets where they describe these beings coming out of the sky and teaching them all kinds of civilization secrets. The same interaction was also chronicled in the Book of Enoch, for those of you who have read the Book of Enoch. And the Book of Enoch basically tells it from a close-up perspective from Enoch himself interacting with the Anunnaki, which he referred to as being, the fallen angels. Really, it should translate to those who from the skies to the earth came. There is some indications that some of the Anunnaki, and one of them was one of two princes that was basically ruling the earth once upon a time, rebelled against the leadership and his own father, who was known as Anu, and Anunnaki means those who came from Anu. And as such, he was left here on the planet with some of his followers. And it's interesting because there's a lot of evidence to suggest that the Anunnaki weren't immortal. They had extremely long lifespans, but they did eventually die. And their followers, both human and Anunnaki, ended up entombing them in various places around the world. And I think that there is a lot of evidence to show that the tomb of Enki himself is in the south of France, not far from the little village of Rennes-le-Château. And we're going to jump down that rabbit hole tonight because what if 3i Atlas is a returning Anunnaki ship? What would that mean for us as a society? And it's going to be interesting to see if they come back to reclaim Enki's body. Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? The 3-eye atlas is approaching it. If you type that in, you're going to come up with 100 different articles and 100 different explanations over what it could possibly be. The webbot says it is definitely alien in nature, and it's going to change everything. And we'll get right back to all of that right after our break.
I'm Sarah, and this is my story.
I'm Ellen, and this is my story.
One night, I was at a bar. I was having fun with my friends.
I
had one too many drinks.
I
got behind the wheel to go home.
I got a cab to go home.
All of a sudden, from out of nowhere, a squirrel ran across the road.
It
happened so quickly, I barely had time to react.
The cabbie barely had time to react.
I swerved.
The cab swerved.
I can't believe it. I hit a guy.
I cannot believe it. The cabbie just missed a guy.
I wish I took a cab.
Thank goodness I took a cab.
You have the choice to save a life. Don't drive buzzed. It's a decision you'll never regret. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. Brought to you by the Department of Transportation and the Ad Council.
Fly portals, slip through, time slip wide, slip through live radio, mystical airwaves, mystical. In the woods, shadows creep, monsters leave. In the woods, strange voices. Shadows creep in the woods, monsters leave. In the woods, bright noises. Mystical. Airwave mystical. Mystical. UFO. Alien overlord. From ancient times to modern days, legends of creatures in sudden disarray. Hear them speak through frequencies. Alien connections. Break it out, truth untold. Tune it in, cosmic mystery. Dark woods where legends breathe. Paranormal whispers, can you believe? Bigfoot strikes through the veils. Dogman howls in the midnight tale. From the static, revelations pour. Portals open, dimensions roar. Truth, no disguise. Cryptid shadows creeping near. Through the static, voices clear. Dark woods where
Welcome back, everybody, to Paranormal Intelligence Agency Radio Live. I'm your host, Jack Carey, your personal tour guide to the Twilight Zone. And tonight we're talking about cyber prophecies. We're talking about paranormal in the news. My a little bit of cryptid corner this evening was somebody did send me an email about a case that happened in Maryland where a family reported a pack of dogmen descending on their farm and basically surrounding their farm. They had to make their getaway in a truck. And so that's something that I'm actively looking into right now as a dogman case. Apparently it happened a few years back. And it's very interesting because I suspect that the dogmen have something to do with the demiurge, that's what I call it, the entity currently residing at Skinwalker Ranch. I think that we have a ground zero area happening there. But tonight we're talking about the crazy little mystery of Rennes-le-Chateau and the idea that one of the ancient Anunnaki princes was buried in the south of France, and that fact has been known to a carefully selected few throughout the ages. We're talking about our cyber prophecies this evening, which all kind of coincide with one another. So, Three Eye Atlas is on its way back. There was a lot of chatter online this last week about that being a Anunnaki ship and what will that mean for our society. And really what it would mean is what the Webbot predicts happens, which is what it refers to as the singularity. So if you type in singularity, like in a search engine of some kind, it's going to bring up all of this artificial intelligence stuff. And so mathematicians for a long time that developed like artificial intelligence have said that there will occur a singularity where artificial intelligence becomes smarter than humanity, and basically reaches a point of equality with humanity, that kind of a thing. The Webbot states the singularity as being different than that. The singularity is the idea that whatever is behind Three Eye Atlas possesses a deeper understanding of the universe's ontology than we currently possess. In other words, they're not, a human life form of any kind, but they understand something deeper about the true nature of the universe, its creation, the creator, the supreme consciousness, God, if you want to use God, all of those terms, the architect of all of creation, right? This reality matrix that we see around us and our place in it and all of that, they're going to have a much broader, much more cosmic, deeper understanding of what that is, and they may relay that to us in an honest way. Maybe they show up and they pretend to be gods, right? But maybe they show up and they say, hey, this is what we found, and we've been around since, for 60 billion years, and this is what we got for you, this is what we think. And it's that understanding, this sort of collision of human belief regarding the universe and their understanding of the universe coming together in such a way that it forms a singularity, and it sort of alters human society from that point forward. That's the prophecy, the cyber prophecy that's out there. You have to keep in mind that the fact that the Webbot predicted the current explosion in the price of silver is what we refer to as a temporal marker, right? So think of it like this. When the Webbot gets one event right in a series of predicted events, the probability of the next prediction in that series of events being correct shoots through the roof, upper 90 percentile. So the fact that silver did what it did, and that was predicted as a major event for humanity, means that the next event in its prediction stream has an extremely high probability of occurring. You can think of it like that. That's the easy way, really, to explain it. And that next event is this upheaval of our economic system, because everything is tied to it. Everything. If you can alter that in such a way, in a very specific way, then you can alter the way humans even behave. And that's really what's taken place. It's a slow, gradual rolling of the snowball right now, but you're going to see it begin to pick up steam. There are a few analysts out there that are very well worth taking a look at. Raoul Paul is one of them out on YouTube. Take a look at him. He's a fascinating individual and an extremely wealthy, well-known financial analyst that has kind of gone rogue and does his own thing now and puts out some really interesting YouTube videos and helps explain the crypto market and stuff. But he can show you how when they pump up the liquidity in any system, which is what they're doing now with lowering interest rates, right? And they have to do it. This is all a natural mechanism of a fiat currency. They're doing exactly what you would expect it to do. The problem is that fiat currencies they have a built-in time bomb. And we're quickly approaching that stage where it just explodes, right? And so Raoul Paul is basically saying you can put the Bitcoin chart right next to their liquidity chart, and they are one for one. When they pump liquidity, the price of Bitcoin goes straight up. Well, guess what they're doing? They're pumping liquidity. Why does it go straight up? Because it's seen as an alternative to a currency that is under constant debasing by the printing machines. That's why. There's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoins. That's all that can ever be mined. Period. That is a disappearing asset, right? The Webbot predicts a future where you have a tiny little micro, like 0.0003641% of a Bitcoin, right? And you're still a millionaire. That's because it has such a limited amount that's available to all of these entities that are going to end up possessing it. There's a lot of other really interesting technological reasons why there's value to Bitcoin, but all you need to know is that the powers that be are migrating onto the blockchain because they can see what's about to happen. That's interesting. Even major precious metal analysts are saying that they're going to tokenize precious metals. So all of that is pointing in the same direction, and it was all predicted by the Webbot. And all of this is going to happen about the same time that 3i Atlas shows up to the scene. There's some people out there that are saying this is a hostile entity of some kind. That hasn't been detected. I'm not saying that's not the case, but that hasn't been detected by the Webbot per se, or by the future forecasting group headed by Dick Allgaier and, a world-class team of remote viewers that have all made themselves wealthy through predicting the price of cryptocurrencies. Which, by the way, that's something for you guys out there. Like, if you want the best remote viewers in the world to give you their predictions on what they think is going to happen in the cryptocurrency market, there is no more valuable paranormal information source than that, in my opinion. And you can get a subscription to their site. It's futureforecastinggroup.com, and have access to all of their remote viewing information that will tell you that information. It's so if you're interested in that cross current of where paranormal meets financial, that is the crossroad right there. You can't get better than that. So, but just be aware that their findings and what they're saying is about to happen in the crypto market have all been reiterated and and predicted a long time ago by the Webbot. So you're seeing 3 or 4 or 5 different avenues all pointing in the same direction. And that direction is a direction of major change and upheaval that's going to take place. And so let's say 3-Eye Atlas gets here, and it's the other Anunnaki prince. It's Enlil. There's 2 of them. One's named Inky, the other one's named Enlil. Together, they sort of ruled the planet. Inky was the scientist, Enlil was the businessman. It's a very easy way to put it. Inky was married to a woman named Ninkar Sog. She went by the nickname Ninti. It means breath of life. She was a genetic scientist. Okay. She did all kinds of genetic work when she was here. She did all kinds of stuff. It was when she was here that all of the cereal grains began to appear, right? She actually developed all the cereal grains that we now possess, which are a total mystery in humanity. Nobody knows where they came from. Well, they came from her. There was a reason why she was, worshipped in ancient cultures like a mother goddess, because she had all these abilities to manipulate genetics, because she was a scientist from an advanced civilization and could do things like that. It wasn't magic, it was science. So, Inky and his wife, Ninti, developed a worker for the Anunnaki hierarchy. They did this by taking like a chimpanzee-like creature, a primate, and they mixed it with their own DNA. In fact, it says that they mixed it with Inky's own DNA, right? And they produced a worker, and that worker was meant to work the gold mines, because the Anunnaki came here for gold. There's a reason why humanity's still fascinated with gold to this day. See how all of this ties together in a fascinating way? The gold is mentioned in the Bible over 500 times. It's been money for 5,000 years. As far back as we can record, probably goes money all the way back to the Anunnaki. The so-called gods found it valuable, so why wouldn't humans, right? It's interesting that gold is only used in the jewelry trade. It's not really used industrially. Silver is used in every industry you can imagine. And 90% of all the silver ever mined has already been used up. Imagine what happens with that math on a 45-year cup and handle pattern. Kaboom. That's dynamite, is what that is. So, but they developed this worker, right? And a lot of people think that this was an early form of human. And the higher council, the so-called High Council of the Anunnaki, saw what they did, and it wasn't an approved experiment. And they made a ton of them, right? And they said, the hierarchy says, well, we got to correct this problem. And you did the unthinkable. You mixed royal Anunnaki DNA into this bloodline. Oh boy, we're going to have to just wipe that out. Wipe it out, because it's an abomination. Well, the hierarchy of the Anunnaki make plans to do just that. And a lot of people believe that's where the Great Flood came from, right? Very interesting. But before that happened, one of Enki's direct lineal offspring, it is said, was Noah himself. And when you read the book of Enoch, Noah clearly has some crazy stuff going on. When he's born, he's able to have full conversations. He's born he can talk with the best of them. And when every once in a while, when he opens his eyes, light will shine out of him. That's mentioned in the book of Enoch, right? Well, they conspire to save some of this human experiment, right, from the wrath of the High Council, and that becomes known to the High Council. Somebody tells on them, probably Enlil's spies, the brothers' spies. And that was seen as the unthinkable crime, the unforgivable sin, right? And so they leave Enki here with like a few of his followers, like 250 of them, and his wife. And that's it. And they take off for other planets and stuff like that, because they were approaching this phase of the descending part of the Kali Yuga. Everybody's like, why did they leave? Well, the descending part of the Kali Yuga, when you become blocked from the galactic center and it starts to block those rays again, is a really nasty time on this planet. You don't want to be here when that happens. That's when you have dark ages and everybody devolves instead of evolves, and they become dumber and more brutal and more brutish, and there's all kinds of wars and pestilence and all kinds of stuff takes place in the descending part of the Kali Yuga. And so they left, and they left them here. And what did they do? They went around the planet building monuments, building pyramids, building things like the structures in Iran that weigh, 350 tons for one block. Baalbek, I think is what it's called. And they went around and they built things with superior mathematical knowledge and nothing else that we can't even replicate to this day. Yeah, I've asked people this before. Imagine that you're a castaway on a desert island, and you're left with no tools, no technology, no medical supplies, no food, no anything. What could you build? What would you build? Because most modern humans wouldn't be able to build much other than maybe a crappy old hut of some kind. And these guys, without anything, went around and built monuments using superior engineering and mathematical knowledge because they were Anunnaki, and we can't replicate any of that today. Now, these guys weren't immortal. They lived for many hundreds of years, though, and that led to their eventual deification by certain, ancient groups of humans deified them because they could live for generations, right? Humans would come and go, and these guys were still there, but eventually they did die. And the mystery of Rennes-le-Chateau conceals the mystery of where they buried Enki. And to make a very long story of the mystery of Rennes-le-Chateau, by the way, for any of you who are unfamiliar with that mystery, is the most fascinating in the world. It is the true, so-called Da Vinci Code, but he just made a bunch of fictional stuff up like any fictional writer and all that kind of stuff. But there's a grain in there, right? And that grain is this tomb that they've kept hidden forever. And it was discovered by researchers that there is a series of 5 mountain peaks in the south of France. Rennes-le-Chateau is the closest village to where this little field is in the center of these 5 naturally occurring mountain peaks. And there's a triangular field there, right? And some researchers who wrote the book, Key to the Sacred Pattern, which has everything to do with this, Henry Lincoln and Michael Bagent, and I forget who there were like 3 authors. They flew over that field and took aerial photographs of it. And when they developed those photographs, they saw that emblazoned out onto the field, they could clearly make out a winged serpent, right? Well, the winged serpent is an ancient Egyptian hieroglyph which referred to the star Sirius. That's interesting because a lot of people believe the Anunnaki also inhabit planets around Sirius. And what's really cool is that central to all of this mystery is an ancient painting, and it's known as the Shepherds of Arcadia. And it is apparent that through the medieval ages, groups that knew the secret of Enki's tomb kind of formed, these secret cabal groups, and they used Renaissance painters to conceal the knowledge of where this tomb was in their paintings. And one of these painters was a man named Nicolas Poussin. And you can look up his painting right now online. It's called The Shepherds of Arcadia, right? And there emblazoned on the front of the tomb is a inscription in Latin, and it says, Et in Arcadia ego. Into Arcadia I. Like an unfinished sentence, right? It doesn't really mean anything that you can ascertain. It's very interesting. It depicts 3 shepherds and a pregnant shepherdess looking at a tomb in the countryside of France. And on the inscription, it says, Et in Arcadia ego. They were able to figure out that the background of where this was and the tomb, the actual sarcophagus that is depicted in that painting was, in fact, in the south of France, very near this field. What's interesting is that I worked as a writer for a magazine that was called Dagobert's Revenge. It was edited by the late, great, now famous Tracy Twyman, who died under extremely mysterious circumstances. She was working as a freelance journalist in Portland, Oregon on the Jeffrey Epstein case, and her death has been widely considered to be not natural. But this magazine and her research led me to the inscription on the tomb. And then I understood what I was looking at was an anagram in Latin. And when you transpose all those letters around, you can form the Latin phrase, I tego dracena, Yah. I guard the dragon, Yah. Well, guess who Yah was? Yah was another Sumerian name for Enki. And at the center of that field where they went, they found a sacred ritual bathing basin in the middle of a copse of trees. And not far from there, a barn farmhouse that they believe is the actual entrance to the tomb of what I think is Enki. They believe it to be perhaps the tomb of some other biblical figure, but all of the inscriptions point to it being Enki. And we will tackle another rabbit hole next week, guys. Join me on PIA Radio Live and stay tuned for Vixen's Vault.